The bulldozer's blade was 6 inches from my cabin wall when I dove in front of it, waving the federal injunction that would save my family's legacy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how one power-drunk HOA president's greed turned a simple ranch cabin into ground zero for a $5 million federal lawsuit that exposed corruption reaching all the way to the state capitol. My name is Jake Morrison, and 3 weeks ago, I was just a 32-year-old contractor trying to honor my late father's memory by building a cabin on our family's ranch in Colorado. Today, I'm the guy who brought down a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed 17 family ranches across 3 counties. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. This story needs to be heard. It started on a Tuesday morning that smelled like pine sap and possibility. I was hammering the final boards onto the cabin frame, sweat dripping, despite the cool mountain air at 7,000 feet elevation. This 40-acre plot had been in my family since 1892. When my great-great-grandfather staked his claim during Colorado's last land rush, the cabin plans were my father's, sketched during his final months battling cancer. "Build it where they can't touch you, son," he'd said, his voice barely a whisper. "Where no HOA can tell you what color to paint your dreams." I'd checked everything 3 times. The land sat 2.3 miles outside any HOA jurisdiction. Every permit was filed and approved. The county inspector had even complimented the craftsmanship. This was as legal as a build could get. That's when the white Mercedes SUV pulled up, kicking up dust clouds that sparkled in the morning sun. The woman who stepped out looked like she'd been assembled by a committee designing the perfect suburban Karen, blonde highlights that cost more than my monthly mortgage, designer athleisure that had never seen actual athletic activity, and oversized sunglasses that probably had their own insurance policy. "You must be Jake Morrison," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone of false friendliness that made my teeth ache. "I'm Patricia Chambers, president of the Mountain Vista Estates HOA. We need to discuss this. Structure your building." I climbed down from the roof beam I'd been securing, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Nice to meet you, Patricia. But I think there's some confusion. This property isn't part of Mountain Vista or any HOA." Her smile tightened like a noose. "Oh, I'm fully aware of the current property lines, but you see, what you build here affects our community's viewshed and property values. This rustic cabin hardly fits the architectural standards we've established." "Good thing your architectural standards don't apply to my land then," I said, keeping my voice level, despite the warning bells going off in my head. Patricia took a step closer, her perfume aggressive enough to constitute assault. "Mr. Morrison, I'm trying to be neighborly here. Silver Ridge Development has made very generous offers for this land. $3.8 million, I believe was the last number. You could build 10 cabins somewhere else with that money." There it was. The real reason for her visit? "My family's legacy isn't for sale," I said firmly. "Not for $3.8 million. Not for $38 million. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Her face flushed beneath the carefully applied makeup. "You're making a costly mistake. Our community has resources, connections. We protect our investments very seriously." "Is that a threat?" I asked, pulling out my phone to record. She noticed the phone, and her demeanor shifted back to fake sweetness. "Of course not. Just a friendly observation about how things work around here. Have a lovely day, Mr. Morrison." As her Mercedes disappeared down the dirt road, I noticed she'd left something behind. A business card, but not hers. "Roger Nathaniel, Senior Vice President, Silver Ridge Development," handwritten on the back. "Last chance. Call today." I crumpled the card and got back to work. But the encounter left me unsettled. That evening, I installed motion-activated cameras around the property. Call it paranoia. But something about Patricia's visit felt like the opening move in a game I didn't yet understand. The next morning, I found out I was right. Fresh tire tracks circled my cabin, and someone had spray-painted EYESOAIR across the eastern wall I'd just finished. The cameras had captured everything. 3 figures in hoodies at 2:47 a.m., methodically vandalizing my property. One of them had forgotten to cover their car's license plate. I was still reviewing the footage when my phone rang. Curtis Webb, the county building inspector who'd approved my permits just last week. "Jake, I'm sorry to do this," he said, sounding genuinely distressed, "but I've received multiple complaints about your structure. I need to come out for a comprehensive safety review." "Curtis, you were just here. You said everything exceeded code requirements." "I know what I said, but when the HOA files formal safety complaints, my hands are tied. I'll be there at 2 p.m. Have all your documentation ready." The HOA. But they had no jurisdiction here. This was harassment. Plain and simple. I spent the morning gathering every piece of paper trail I had. Permits, surveys, inspection reports, even the deed going back to the original land grant. By the time Curtis arrived, I had a filing box that could have doubled as a legal brief. Curtis looked uncomfortable as he examined the cabin again, taking photos from angles he'd already documented. "Jake, between you and me, this is the best-built structure I've seen all year. But Patricia Chambers has been calling your boss." "I finished." He nodded miserably. "She's claiming you're building without permits, that this is agricultural land, not zoned for residential structures. None of it's true. But she's got 3 lawyers saying otherwise. So, what happens now?" "I have to issue a stop work order pending a full zoning review. Could take months." He handed me the yellow paper that felt like a death sentence. "I'm sorry, Jake. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing here is beautiful. Your dad would be proud." Askurtas drove away. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This can all go away. Call Roger. Final offer expires at midnight." I was still staring at the text when another car pulled up. This time it was an older Ford pickup, rust competing with the original blue paint. The man who got out looked to be in his 60s, weathered face and calloused hands, marking him as someone who worked for a living. "You Jake Morrison?" he asked, approaching cautiously. "Depends who's asking. Name's Bill Hendricks. I used to own the ranch 3 properties over, until Patricia Chambers decided she wanted it." He gestured toward my cabin. "Saw the stop work order go up. Figured you should know what you're really dealing with." We sat on the cabin's unfinished porch as Bill told his story. 2 years ago, he'd been raising cattle on land. His family had worked for 4 generations. Then Patricia became HOA president, and suddenly he was drowning in violations. Noise complaints about his cattle. Environmental violations that didn't exist. Mysterious contamination reports that killed his organic certification. The legal bills ate up our savings, Bill said, his voice heavy with defeat. When the bank called in our loan early, said there'd been complaints about property maintenance, we had no choice but to sell. Silver Ridge bought it for a quarter of its value. Month later, Patricia's son-in-law got a promotion at Silver Ridge. Funny how that works. "How many others?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. 17 families that I know of. The Johnsons, the Petermans, the whole Martinez clan, all forced out. All sold to Silver Ridge at bankruptcy prices. Your 40 acres is the key piece they need for their casino development. Without it, the whole project falls apart. "Casino?" Bill pulled out his phone, showing me architectural renderings he'd screenshot from a leaked presentation. "The Mountain Palace Resort and Casino. $500 million project. Your land sits right where they need the main access road. Patricia gets a 2% finder's fee for every property she helps them acquire. 2% of my land's true value would be. I did the mental math and felt sick. Patricia stood to make millions if she could force me out. Why hasn't anyone gone to the authorities? I asked. Bill laughed bitterly. With what proof? Patricia's careful. Nothing officially ties her to Silver Ridge. The complaints all look legitimate on paper, and half the county commissioners are investors in the casino project. After Bill left, I sat in my truck doing research on my laptop, using my phone's hotspot. What I found made my blood run cold. Patricia Chambers had been systematically destroying ranching families for 3 years. The pattern was always the same: escalating HOA complaints, mysterious legal troubles, financial pressure, forced sale to Silver Ridge at massive losses. But Patricia had made one mistake. She'd assumed I was just another isolated rancher who'd fold under pressure. She didn't know I'd spent 2 years in law school before switching to construction. She didn't know I'd been recording every interaction. And she definitely didn't know that my sister Emma was an investigative journalist who'd been looking for her next big story. I called Emma that night. Hey sis, remember how you said you wanted to expose corporate corruption? I might have something for you. The next morning started with sirens. Not one or two, but a whole parade of emergency vehicles screaming up my private drive. Fire trucks, police cars, even an ambulance. I ran out to meet them, still in my pajamas and work boots. Sir, we've received reports of a structure fire with possible casualties. The fire chief announced, already directing his crew to deploy hoses. There's no fire, I said, gesturing at my obviously not burning cabin. This is harassment. The chief looked confused, then angry. We've got a recording of someone screaming for help from these coordinates. That's when I heard it. A woman's voice, playing from speakers hidden somewhere in the tree line. Help, oh God. The cabin's on fire, someone help us. It took 20 minutes to convince the emergency crews that this was a false alarm, another 20 to file reports. The sheriff's deputy, a young guy named Martinez, pulled me aside. Between you and me, this is the third fake emergency call to properties Patricia Chambers has complained about, but without proof, she's behind it. He shrugged helplessly. I pointed to my cameras. I've got 8 high-definition cameras running 24/7. If someone planted those speakers, I have them on video. Sure enough, the 3 a.m. footage showed 2 figures in black, installing speakers in the trees. One of them made the mistake of pulling down their mask to smoke a cigarette. The face was clear as day. Tommy Chambers, Patricia's 25-year-old son. I saved multiple copies of that footage, uploaded it to 3 different cloud services, and emailed it to Emma. If Patricia wanted to play dirty, she'd picked the wrong opponent. That afternoon, while I was documenting the morning's chaos, a convoy of vehicles appeared on the main road. Not just cars, but heavy machinery, bulldozers, excavators, and a crane, all bearing the Silver Ridge Development logo. They parked just outside my property line, engines idling like predators, waiting to pounce. Patricia emerged from her Mercedes, this time flanked by 2 men in suits who screamed lawyer louder than any billboard. She also had a police escort, 2 sheriff's deputies I didn't recognize. Mr. Morrison, she called out, holding a manila folder like it was a weapon. I have here an emergency condemnation order. Your structure has been deemed an imminent safety hazard. You have 1 hour to remove any personal belongings before demolition begins. My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. Let me see that order. The document looked official enough, complete with county seals and an illegible signature, but I'd learned enough in law school to spot the problems: wrong statutory citations, missing mandatory notifications, and most tellingly, dated for today when emergency condemnations required a 3-day posting period. This is fraudulent, I said, pulling out my phone to record. You can't condemn a building that passed inspection 4 days ago. Patricia's smile was all teeth and no warmth. The inspection was invalidated due to irregularities. Inspector Webb is under investigation for taking bribes. Isn't that convenient? You mean the inspector who wouldn't play ball with your scheme is being framed? I shot back. One of her lawyers stepped forward. Sir, I'd advise you to comply. Resisting lawful orders will only add criminal charges to your problems. That's when my neighbor arrived. Not Bill this time, but Maria Santos, a tiny woman in her 70s who ranched the property to my east. She marched right up to Patricia, ignoring the lawyers and deputies. You vulture, Maria spat. First, the Hendricks. Then my nephew's family. Now this boy. When does it end? Mrs. Santos. This doesn't concern you. Patricia said coldly. Like hell it doesn't. I've been recording your visits to my place. Patricia. 3 a.m. drive-bys. Photographers trespassing. Mysterious dead cattle. I've got it all documented. Patricia's face darkened. You should be careful. Mrs. Santos. Accidents happen on these old ranches. Fires. Equipment failures. Are you threatening her? I asked, making sure my phone caught every word. The deputy stepped between us. Everyone calm down. Mr. Morrison, you need to vacate the premises while we verify this condemnation order. I recognized him now. Deputy Ashford, whose brother-in-law worked for Silver Ridge. The corruption ran deeper than I'd thought. I'm not going anywhere. I said, this is my land, built with legal permits. And that condemnation order isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Patricia nodded to someone behind me. I was hoping you'd say that. The bulldozer roared to life, black smoke belching from its exhaust. The operator, a thick-necked man with dead eyes, began rolling toward my property line. You can't do this, I shouted over the engine noise. Watch me, Patricia replied. Deputy Ashford, if Mr. Morrison interferes with lawful demolition, arrest him for obstruction. The bulldozer crossed onto my property, massive blade lowering toward my cabin. Everything my father had dreamed, everything I'd built, was about to be destroyed by corruption and greed. That's when Maria did something that changed everything. She pulled out her phone and went live on Facebook. This is happening right now, she shouted into the camera. Patricia Chambers is illegally destroying Jake Morrison's cabin. Look at this, private property being demolished with fake documents. Within minutes, cars started arriving. Other ranchers, people from town who'd heard about the live stream. Soon there were 20 people, then 30, all filming with their phones as the bulldozer approached my cabin. I stood my ground in front of the structure, keys to my truck in one hand, phone in the other. You'll have to go through me. I called out. The bulldozer stopped 10 feet away. The operator looking to Patricia for guidance. She was frantically talking on her phone, probably to her Silver Ridge handlers. As more and more witnesses arrived, back up. Someone shouted from the growing crowd. That's attempted murder if you move that machine another inch. Deputy Ashford looked increasingly uncomfortable as legitimate law enforcement began arriving. Drawn by the social media storm, a state police cruiser pulled up, then another. What's going on here? The state trooper demanded. Taking in the scene? Patricia tried her charm offensive. Officer, we're executing a lawful condemnation order. These people are interfering. The trooper examined the document, then looked at his partner. This is dated today. Emergency condemnations require 72 hours notice minimum. Who authorized this? Commissioner Bradley. Patricia said, but her confidence was cracking. Bradley's in Florida for his daughter's wedding. The trooper said slowly, has been for a week. So unless he flew back to sign this specific document, the crowd was growing larger, angrier. Someone started chanting, shame, and others joined in. Patricia's perfect composure finally shattered. "You idiots!" she screamed at the crowd. "Do you know what this land is worth? What the casino will bring to this county? Jobs, revenue, progress. But you'd rather protect some worthless cabin and your precious cows." "Did she just admit to the casino deal?" someone called out. "I got it on video," another voice confirmed. The state trooper stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us. There are some questions about this documentation." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snarled. "Do you know who I am? Who my lawyers are? I'll have your badge." But more police were arriving now, including Sheriff Coleman himself. Looking grim, he'd been at a conference in Denver, conveniently scheduled during Patricia's planned demolition. "Patricia Chambers," the sheriff said formally, "you're under arrest for falsifying government documents, criminal conspiracy, and attempted destruction of property." "You can't arrest me!" she shrieked as they cuffed her. "I'm the HOA president. I have immunity." "That's not how immunity works," the sheriff said dryly. As they led Patricia away, she turned back to scream at me. "This isn't over. Morrison, Silver Ridge has more money than God. You'll be buried in lawsuits. Your life is over." The bulldozer operator, seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly backed his machine off my property. The Silver Ridge convoy scattered like roaches when the lights come on. But even as I felt relief watching Patricia get stuffed into a police car, I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, Emma arrived from Denver with a camera crew and a determination I recognized from our childhood. "Baby brother," she said, hugging me in front of the damaged cabin, "you've stumbled onto something huge. Silver Ridge isn't just operating in Colorado. They're doing this in 5 states. And Patricia Chambers? She's small potatoes compared to what's really going on." We sat on the cabin porch as she showed me her research. Financial documents linking Silver Ridge to offshore accounts, political contributions that looked more like bribes. A pattern of destroyed family ranches turned into casinos and resorts across the American West. "But here's the smoking gun," Emma said, pulling up a document on her laptop. "Patricia Chambers isn't just getting finder's fees. She's a full partner in Silver Ridge. Her name's hidden behind 3 shell companies. But it's there. Every ranch she's destroyed. She gets a percentage of the eventual development profits." "How much are we talking about?" Emma's expression was grim. "Based on the 17 properties she's already acquired, she's looking at about $15 million in future profits. Your land was going to be the crown jewel. The access road placement would have doubled the casino's value." My phone buzzed. An unknown number. But I answered anyway. "Mr. Morrison?" The voice was smooth, professional, and somehow menacing. "My name is Vincent Castellano. I represent certain interests regarding the Mountain Palace development. I understand there was an unfortunate misunderstanding today." "Misunderstanding? Your people tried to bulldoze my cabin." Patricia Chambers exceeded her authority. She's been relieved of her responsibilities. But the offer for your land remains. In fact, we're prepared to increase it. $5 million. Cash. No conditions. You could build your father's cabin anywhere else. Not interested. There was a pause. "Mr. Morrison." Patricia was an amateur. Crude methods. Emotional decisions. "We're professionals. We'd much prefer a business arrangement. But if you force us to resolve this through other channels, is that a threat?" "Mr. Castellano, it's a certainty. $5 million is generosity. The alternative is less pleasant. You have 24 hours to consider. Oh, and Mr. Morrison, you might want to check on your friend Maria Santos. These old ranchers, they're so vulnerable to accidents." The line went dead. I immediately called Maria. No answer. Racing to my truck, I tore down the dirt road toward her ranch, calling 911 as I drove. Her house was dark, too dark. Maria always kept lights on, a habit from years of living alone. I found her collapsed in her barn, unconscious but breathing. Someone had knocked her out and started a fire in the hay storage. If I'd arrived 5 minutes later, as paramedics loaded Maria into the ambulance, I noticed something clutched in her hand. A Silver Ridge business card with a message scrawled on the back. Last warning. Morrison. Emma filmed everything, her camera catching the fear and rage I couldn't hide anymore. This wasn't just about land or money now. They'd crossed a line. We're going live with this story tomorrow. Emma said. Full exposé. National coverage. They want to play hardball? Let's see how they like playing in front of millions of viewers. But as we drove back to my cabin in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. Patricia had been arrested too easily. Castellano's threat was too obvious. Something bigger was coming. That's when I saw the glow on the horizon, orange and flickering, coming from the direction of my property. No, I whispered, flooring the accelerator. We crested the hill to see my cabin engulfed in flames. Fire trucks were already arriving, but it was too late. Everything my father had dreamed, everything I'd built, was turning to ash against the night sky. Standing at the edge of the inferno, watching firefighters battle the blaze, I felt something inside me harden into diamond-sharp resolve. They'd burned my father's dream. They'd hurt Maria. They'd corrupted half the county government. But they'd also made a crucial mistake. They'd left me alive, angry, and with nothing left to lose, and I had something they didn't expect. Evidence. Every threat, every document, every recording backed up in multiple locations. Emma put her hand on my shoulder as we watched the flames. Jake, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I said, my voice steady, despite the rage burning hotter than the fire. They just gave us the lead for your story. Silver Ridge burns down veteran's dream cabin. It'll go viral within hours. My phone rang. Castellano again. Tragic about the fire, he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. These old wooden structures, so vulnerable. I trust you'll reconsider our offer now? 5 million buys a lot of new dreams. You know what, Vincent, I said, watching the last of my cabin collapse into embers. I was going to take your money, walk away, start over somewhere else. But you just made this personal. That would be inadvisable. Mr. Morrison, see you in federal court. Castellano. Hope you've got good lawyers. I hung up and turned to Emma. How fast can you get this story out? 6 hours for the online edition. But Jake, these people are dangerous. So am I said, pulling out the thumb drive I always kept with me. Everything's on here. Every recording. Every document. Every piece of evidence. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you, Emma said firmly, because in 6 hours, you'll be too public to touch. And tomorrow morning, we're meeting with the FBI. My editor has connections. As we drove away from the burning ruins of my father's dream, I thought about what he'd told me in his final days. Build it where they can't touch you. Son, he was wrong about one thing. They could touch it, they could burn it down. But what they couldn't destroy was the truth. And in 24 hours, that truth was going to destroy them. The ashes were still warm when the FBI arrived at dawn, their black SUVs cutting through the morning mist like sharks through water. I hadn't slept, hadn't left the ruins of my father's dream. I sat on a scorched foundation stone, clutching the thumb drive that held 3 years of Patricia Chambers' crimes. Special Agent Sarah Chen stepped carefully through the debris field, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes sharp with interest. Mr. Morrison? I'm Agent Chen. Your sister's editor called us about Silver Ridge development. Then we saw the news coverage of last night's fire. Emma's story had gone live at 3 a.m. by sunrise. It had been shared over 1 million times. The footage of Patricia's arrest, her confession about the casino, the bulldozer threatening my cabinet of it played on repeat across social media. But the fire footage, captured by my security cameras until the flames consumed them, was what turned public interest into public outrage. They didn't even try to hide it. I said, standing to shake Agent Chen's hand. The accelerant patterns, the multiple ignition points. Arson investigators already confirmed it. We're not just here about the arson. Agent Chen said, her partner Agent Davis photographing the scene. We've been investigating Silver Ridge for 18 months. Money laundering, political corruption, possible ties to organized crime. Your evidence might be what we need to bring them down. I handed her the thumb drive. Every interaction with Patricia Chambers, every threat from Vincent Castellano, financial records, Emma uncovered showing the shell companies, it's all there. Agent Chen's eyes widened slightly. You recorded Castellano? Every word, including the threat against Maria Santos, right before someone tried to burn down her barn with her inside. Is she able to testify? She's tough. Already gave a statement from her hospital bed. And she's not the only one ready to talk. 17 families lost their ranches to Patricia's schemes. They're all willing to testify. Emma appeared with her camera crew. Having spent the night interviewing displaced ranchers, Jake, you need to see this, she said, showing me her phone. Patricia Chambers just called from county lockup. She wants to make a deal. The video showed Patricia in an orange jumpsuit, her perfect hair now flat and lifeless, but her eyes burned with desperate cunning. I know where the bodies are buried, she said to the camera. Literally. Silver Ridge isn't just about casinos, but I'll only talk if I get immunity. Agent Chen took the phone, studying the video. Bodies? She's talking about Daniel Martinez. I said quietly, a rancher who refused to sell 3 years ago. His death was ruled an accident, tractor rollover. But his widow always said the brake lines looked cut. We'll need to interview her immediately. Agent Chen said, already making calls. Mr. Morrison, I need you to come to our field office. If Patricia's telling the truth about murders, you're not safe here. As if to emphasize her point, 3 black Escalades appeared on the main road. Moving slowly past the burned property, Vincent Castellano's people, making sure I saw them, making sure I knew they were watching. Actually, Agent Davis said, why don't we follow you to the field office? Just to be safe. The FBI's Denver field office was a fortress of glass and steel, nothing like Patricia's suburban HOA kingdom. In a secure conference room, I laid out 3 years of evidence while Emma's footage played on wall-mounted screens. This is bigger than we thought. Agent Chen said after 2 hours of review, the casino developments are just the visible part. Silver Ridge is washing cartel money through these projects. Every ranch they steal becomes another link in their chain. That's why they're so desperate for my land. I realized it's not just about road access. It's the perfect location for moving whatever they're moving. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking. Agent Davis confirmed, your 40 acres would give them a corridor straight from the interstate to the back roads. No oversight, no questions. My phone buzzed. Castellano again. Agent Chen nodded for me to answer while they traced the call. Mr. Morrison, I'm disappointed. Castellano's voice was cold now, the false politeness gone. Your sister's little news story has created unnecessary complications, but media attention fades. We don't. Neither does the FBI. I said, they're quite interested in your organization. Vincent. Silence. Then, you have no idea what you've done. Patricia was protecting you. In her way. Keeping things civilized. Without her buffer, well, let's just say my associates have less refined methods. Is that another threat? It's a prophecy. Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame. Mr. Morrison, they'll be your last. The line went dead. Agent Chen looked grim. He's spooked. That means he's dangerous. We're putting you in protective custody. No, I said firmly. I'm not hiding. My father didn't build that cabin for me to run when things got hard. Besides, you need me visible. The more public this is, the safer I am. Emma agreed. Jake's right. We've got 3 major networks wanting interviews. 60 Minutes is sending a crew. Every hour he's on camera is another hour. Silver Ridge can't touch him without confirming everything we've reported. That afternoon, Patricia's attorney arrived at the FBI office. Marcus Webb, no relation to the building inspector, was a sharp-dressed shark who specialized in turning state's evidence into get-out-of-jail-free cards. My client has information about 17 murders connected to Silver Ridge Development. He announced she's willing to provide dates, names, and locations in exchange for immunity and witness protection. 17? Agent Chen couldn't hide her shock. That's just in Colorado. Webb continued. Nationally, we're looking at over 50. Silver Ridge doesn't take no for an answer. Patricia was brought in wearing shackles, a far cry from the HOA queen who'd terrorized ranchers for years. But when she started talking, even hardened FBI agents looked shaken. Vincent Castellano is middle management. She began. The real power is the Torino family out of Chicago. They needed legitimate businesses to wash money. I needed capital to buy influence. It was supposed to be simple. Use HOA regulations to force sales. Take our cut. Everyone profits. When did it become murder? Agent Chen asked. When Daniel Martinez threatened to go to the feds, Vincent handled it personally. Made it look like an accident. After that, most ranchers sold without much fight. Jake Morrison was supposed to be easy, young, isolated, financially stretched from building, but he documented everything, recorded everything. And that damn Maria Santos kept helping him. So you tried to kill them both? Patricia laughed bitterly. I didn't try to kill anyone. That was Vincent going off script. I wanted to use legal pressure. Bureaucratic warfare. But when Jake refused $5 million, she shrugged. Vincent doesn't handle rejection well. Tell us about the money. Agent Davis prompted. $100 million a year. Minimum. Drugs from Mexico. Weapons going south. Girls from Eastern Europe. The casinos were perfect cover. Who questions large cash transactions at a casino? As Patricia laid out the entire operation, I felt sick. My family's land, or legacy, had been targeted by an organization that traded in human misery. The cabin burning down wasn't just arson, it was a message from monsters who saw people as obstacles to profit. There's a meeting tomorrow night. Patricia continued. Vincent's bringing the Torino family's enforcer to deal with the Morrison problem permanently. They think I don't know about it. But I still have sources. Where? Agent Chen demanded. The old Bentley ranch. Silver Ridge bought it 6 months ago. It's where they store things. And where they handle problems? Agent Chen immediately began planning a raid, but I had my own plans forming. I want to be there. I said, absolutely not. Agent Chen said, you're a civilian. I'm bait. I corrected. They want me dead. Use that. Let them think they've got a shot. Then take them down. It's too dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. But this is our chance to end it. Not just for me, but for every family they've destroyed. Emma backed me up. I'll have a news crew ready. Nothing stops criminals faster than live television coverage of their arrest. After hours of argument, a compromise was reached. I'd be under heavy FBI protection, wearing a wire, with agents positioned everywhere. The goal was to get Vincent and his associates on tape discussing their crimes, then arrest them before any violence could occur. That night, staying in an FBI safe house, I got a call from Maria Santos. Her voice was weak but determined. "Jake, I'm getting out of the hospital tomorrow. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. Maria, you've done enough. You nearly died because of me." "Because of them," she corrected. "My husband died fighting in Korea. He didn't sacrifice everything for his country so some mob thugs could steal our land. I've got something that might help. Security footage from the last 3 years. Every time Patricia or her people surveilled my property, it's all backed up off-site. Send it to Agent Chen." I said, "And Maria, thank you. Thank you for standing up when everyone else gave in. Your father would be proud." The next morning brought a tsunami of media attention. Emma's story had evolved from regional interest to national scandal. 3 senators called for investigations. The Justice Department announced a task force. Silver Ridge's stock price plummeted 60% in pre-market trading. Vincent Castellano made one last call. "You could have been rich," he said. "Now you'll be nothing." "I'd rather be nothing than be you." I replied, "Tonight, Morrison, your FBI friends can't protect you forever. They won't need to after tonight." Vincent, the Bentley Ranch sat in a valley between 2 ridges, perfect for privacy and containing screams. The main house had been converted into something between a warehouse and a fortress. As darkness fell, FBI agents took positions while I waited in a surveillance van with Agent Chen. "Remember," she said, adjusting my wire, "we need them to incriminate themselves. Talk about the murders, the money laundering, the trafficking. Get them bragging. Vincent's ego is bigger than Patricia's." I said, "Give him an audience. He'll confess to anything." At 9 p.m., I drove my truck onto the property, alone, as far as anyone could see. My hands were steady on the wheel. My father's voice in my head, "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Son, it's doing what's right despite the fear." Vincent waited in the main house with 4 other men. One stood out tall, scarred, with dead eyes that had seen too much violence. This had to be the Torino enforcer. "Mr. Morrison." Vincent greeted me with mock courtesy. "So good of you to accept our invitation. I didn't see much choice after you burned down my cabin." Vincent smiled. "Unfortunate, but necessary. You forced our hand. However, I'm willing to be generous one last time. Sign over your land. Disappear quietly, and we'll let you live. Like you let Daniel Martinez live?" The enforcer stepped forward. "Martinez was stupid." "Don't be stupid. 17 murders in Colorado alone." I said, making sure the wire caught every word. "How do you sleep at night? On silk sheets in a $50 million penthouse?" Vincent laughed. "This is business. Morrison, your land is worth hundreds of millions to our operation. The drugs alone—" "Vincent," the enforcer warned, but Vincent was enjoying himself. "What's he going to do? Go to the cops? He'll be dead in an hour." "Yes. Morrison, the drugs, the guns, the girls. Your precious ranch will be the highway for all of it. And there's nothing. FBI. Nobody move." Agents burst through every entrance. Weapons drawn. Red laser dots painting the room like angry stars. Vincent's face went from smug to shocked in a heartbeat. "Vincent Castellano, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, money laundering." Agent Chen's voice continued the litany of charges as Vincent was cuffed. The enforcer tried to run, but didn't make it 3 steps before being tackled. The others surrendered without fight, their tough guy personas evaporating in the face of federal agents. You set me up. Vincent snarled at me. You set yourself up the day you decided my family's land was worth killing for. I replied. As they led him away, Vincent made one last threat. The Torinos have a long memory. Morrison, this isn't over. Yes, it is, Agent Chen said. The Torino compound in Chicago was raided an hour ago. 47 arrests. Your bosses are going away forever. Vincent, and so are you. Outside. Emma's news crew captured every moment. The story went live. Instantly mobsters arrested. Conspiracy exposed. Justice served. By morning, Silver Ridge Development had collapsed entirely. Its executives fleeing or arrested. Patricia Chambers, watching from her cell, made a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life. She'd spend it in federal prison, far from any HOA she could terrorize. A week later, I stood on my scorched land with Agent Chen and a team of lawyers. The FBI had seized all of Silver Ridge's assets under RICO statutes. The families who'd lost their ranches would get first claim on restitution. The Martinez family will get their ranch back. Agent Chen informed me, along with damages. Same for the others. As for you, the federal prosecutor stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, your actions exposed a criminal enterprise that spanned 5 states. The forfeiture laws are complex, but the bottom line is this. Silver Ridge's assets in Colorado alone are worth over $200 million. You're entitled to a substantial reward. How substantial? $5 million. Ironically, the same amount Vincent offered you. I looked at the burnt ground where my cabin had stood. I don't want their money. Split it among the families they destroyed. That's generous. But you've lost everything. Your cabin. I haven't lost everything. I interrupted. I've got the land. I've got the plans. I can rebuild. I smiled, thinking of my father. Besides, something tells me I won't have trouble finding help. I was right. The next morning, trucks started arriving. Ranchers from 3 counties. Construction workers. Ordinary people who'd seen the news. They came with lumber, tools, and willing hands. Figured you could use some help. Bill Hendricks said, the rancher who'd first warned me about Patricia. Neighbors help neighbors. That's how it's always been out here. Maria Santos arrived in a lawn chair, still recovering but determined to supervise. Build it right this time, she called out, and maybe add a sprinkler system. By sunset, the new foundation was poured out, stronger than before, deeper, built to last generations. As we worked, Emma interviewed volunteers, capturing the story of a community coming together to rebuild what greed had destroyed. Why are you helping? She asked one volunteer. Because he stood up when the rest of us were too scared. The man replied, because sometimes the good guys need to win. 3 months later, the cabin was complete, better than before, built not just by my hands but by a community that had remembered what mattered. At the celebration, hundreds came to see justice rebuilt in wood and stone. Patricia Chambers watched from her federal cell where she'd spend the next 2 decades. Vincent Castellano got life without parole for the murders. The Torino family's empire crumbled, their leaders imprisoned, their assets seized, and on a small ranch in Colorado, a cabin stood strong against the mountains. Proof that some things can't be bulldozed, burned, or bought. My father's dream, rebuilt and reinforced, ready to last another 100 years. As the sun set on the celebration, I stood where Patricia had first threatened me, looking out at land that would never be sold, never be developed, never be anything but what it had always been home. You did it, son. I could almost hear my father say, you built it where they couldn't touch it. Not the cabin that they could burn, but the truth The community, the justice, that's what they couldn't destroy. $5 million. That's what they'd offered for my silence. My surrender. Instead, their greed cost them everything, while I gained something worth more than money, proof that standing up to corruption, no matter how powerful, is always worth the fight. The cabin stands today, a monument not to one man's stubbornness but to a community's courage. And in the courthouse, a plaque commemorates the case that brought down a multi-state criminal enterprise, Morrison v. Silver Ridge Development. Sometimes, the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth. Patricia thought she could bully me like she'd bullied so many others. Vincent thought he could burn away resistance. They learned the hard way that some things, family, legacy, justice, burn brighter than any fire they could set. And somewhere in federal prison, Patricia Chambers has 25 years to think about the day she drove onto my property and started a war she couldn't win. The HOA Karen who wanted to bulldoze my cabin ended up bulldozing her own life and taking a criminal empire down with her. The $5 million lawsuit? That was just the beginning. The real judgment was measured in justice served, families restored, and proof that sometimes, when you stand your ground, you don't just save your own land, you save your whole community. 3 weeks later, the first restitution checks went out. The legal framework Ashley's lawyers created became a model for other communities dealing with HOA corruption. She testified before a congressional committee about predatory HOA practices, using her mother's crimes as Exhibit A for why reform was needed. The media loved it, the daughter undoing the mother's evil, the community healing through collective action. But for those of us living it, it was simpler. It was neighbors helping neighbors. Even when one of those neighbors was the daughter of their tormentor, Maria Santos, fully recovered now, started a support group for Patricia's victims. They met monthly in the community center, sharing stories and strategies for rebuilding. What started as group therapy evolved into a powerful advocacy organization pushing for HOA reform nationwide. We're calling it the Morrison Protocol. Maria told me one evening, "Document everything. Stand together. Never fight alone. What you did becomes the template for others facing the same harassment." The ripple effects spread further than anyone expected. FBI agents used our case in training scenarios. Law schools taught it as an example of RICO applications in suburban corruption. 3 states passed Patricia's laws, limiting HOA powers and requiring transparency in all dealings. But the most unexpected outcome came a year later. Curtis Webb, the building inspector who'd been forced to issue the stop work order, showed up with a gift. He'd spent months creating a detailed history of every ranch Patricia had destroyed, complete with family photos and stories. "I thought you should have this," he said. "These families, their histories, they're part of your story now. Part of what you saved." The book was beautiful, heartbreaking, and hopeful all at once. 17 families whose American dreams had been crushed by greed, but who now had hope of restoration. The Martinez Ranch was operational again. The Hendricks family had returned one by one. The land was healing. Vincent Castellano died in prison 13 months into his life sentence, shanked by another inmate over a card game. Though investigators suspected it was the Torino family tying up loose ends, Patricia attended the funeral in shackles. The only mourner for a man who'd turned her greed into murder, she served 18 years of her 25-year sentence, released early for good behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations. By then, she was a broken woman in her 70s, living in a halfway house in Kansas, forbidden from serving on any HOA board for life. I saw her once more. 3 years after her release, she was bagging groceries at a discount store. Her designer lifestyle a distant memory. Our eyes met across the produce section. For a moment, I saw the ghost of the woman who'd threatened to destroy everything I loved. Then she looked away, defeated. I bought my groceries and left without speaking. Some confrontations don't need words. Living well, rebuilding strong, protecting others from predators like her, that was revenge enough. Today, my cabin stands surrounded by a thriving community of ranchers who refuse to let corruption win. The burned ground where Patricia tried to destroy my father's dream now grows wildflowers that bloom every spring. Beauty from ashes. And in law enforcement offices across the country, a simple phrase has become shorthand for standing up to corruption. Remember Morrison. Remember that one person documenting truth can topple an empire of lies. Remember that communities united are stronger than any conspiracy. Remember that sometimes, when they try to bulldoze your dreams, you don't just rebuild, you build a movement that ensures no one else suffers the same fate. $5 million. That's what this lawsuit became in the public mind. But the real value? Immeasurable. It's in every family that kept their home because HOA reform passed. It's in every corrupt official who thinks twice because they know someone might be recording. It's in every person who stands up to a bully because they remember that David beat Goliath. The cabin still stands, strong, defiant, and home.